Yeah, so I spoke at Corn University, so it looks like we got a little bit different crowd here today. I hope that we all repeat a couple of slides, but not too much. I worked for USDA for a number of years, 11 years actually, and 1 year ago today, I quit because the farmers and the beekeepers are leading the charge in what is now, I think, I refer to as the regenerative ag movement. And this type of paradigm shift that we are seeing is the future of farming. What you guys are studying right now, why you're here, is the future. Paradigm shifts don't come from the government, and they don't come from the university systems. They come from the bottom up. They come from folks like you. And that is why I quit, was so that I could try to help as much as I can using what skills we have. So we started two things: Ecdysis Foundation, Blue Dasher Farm Initiative. All right. Here is the Blue Dasher Farm. Here it is. That's where we live. Right there, that little star in eastern South Dakota. Normally this is a little video, but it's not queuing up, so you can't see everything. But we are a 53-acre farm, as well as a research facility, which is cut off right there. What I want this to be is the first in a national network in centers for excellence in regenerative farming. What is regenerative farming? Increasing soil health and biodiversity on your farm while producing healthier food profitably. It can be done. It is being done. All right? When I quit, I reached out to the farmers and the beekeepers around the world and said, if you believe in this, if you think this is the future like we do, please consider supporting it. And people from around the world bankrolled a research facility in regenerative ag. That has never happened before, okay? That's never happened before. What are we doing? We're using our scientific skills to remove barriers from the innovators. The guys who are on the front edge of this movement are encountering hurdles that are not being addressed by any other infrastructure, right? So we're trying to bring what skill we have to make sure that we can keep the innovators moving forward. And we want to take what those innovators are doing and scale it and transfer it to as many people when they're ready to learn the truth. All right? When they're ready to learn, we want to have the answers ready for them. Education is a key component in this. We are not only training the next generation of scientists in these practices and principles, but we are also putting together an education curriculum for immersion courses in systems-level thinking for farmers, beekeepers that are interested in taking advantage of this. And then finally, I am a scientist by training. By many metrics, I'm a good scientist. I met the president in the White House for being one of the top young scientists in the country. Obama. Yeah. Obama. And but I can talk to you all day long, and I can give you all the data in the world, right? But if I haven't walked a mile in your shoes, I don't know how much credibility I have. And so I can give advice, but unless I take that advice myself and put it to work, well, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And so we are tying our success to putting these practices and principles into play on our own operation. I can tell you, after our first year, I'd managed research plots, and I'd managed beehives, but I was never a farmer, and I was never a beekeeper, and that's different. Okay? So I get it. I get it. But at the same time, in our first year, we netted $500 an acre. And that beat out most of my neighbors in our first year of farming just by using these practices and principles that we're talking about. And I'll kind of touch on those here soon. Why? Why? This is a question that everybody needs to be asking themselves. Why are you here? Why did you come to this meeting? Why aren't you sitting over in that other building? Why are you sitting in the chapel right now? And I think that there's a lot of good reasons for it. Making money, there's a lot, that's important, right? But I think there's a lot of ways to make money. Growing food, that makes sense, right? There's a lot of ways of growing food. Why have you chosen this path? I can tell you that my reasons, it would have been the easiest thing in the world for me to keep my federal job and publish my 2 papers a year on how fast lady beetles walk and made a nice salary for my family and done my job as a federal employee. There is a sense of urgency. This planet is facing some very serious issues right now. The status quo is not good enough anymore. We need bold action if we are going to solve some of these issues. One of the central issues that we are facing is that biodiversity is in decline. We are currently experiencing on planet Earth the worst mass extinction event that this planet has ever seen. This is worse than the mass extinction event of the dinosaur extinctions, right? We are losing entire habitats, wetlands. Where'd the prairies go? Entire insect communities, bees, bats, birds, butterflies. Folks, this isn't a bee problem. This is a biodiversity problem. I keynoted at the big bee meeting down in Galveston in January. And the first question I asked the beekeepers was, how long has CCD been going on, colony collapse disorder? And they told me 10 years. I said, well, you spent hundreds of millions of dollars on research on this problem over the last 10 years. How's that working out for you? How's your bees doing? They're still dying at about, we're losing about 50% of all hives on an annual basis still. Imagine losing 50% of your herd or 50% of your crop every year. Because this isn't a bee problem. They're dumping all of their research into what is a biodiversity problem. And how do you solve this? Let me see. You identify what the issue is. The issue isn't that the bees have a new pest or a new disease. The issue is that our agricultural systems are far too simplified. Okay? Large monocultures. Agroecosystems. This is the percent of total land area in the United States. Corn, 5%. This isn't cropland. This is total land cover. Soybeans, 4.5%. Wheat, 2.5%. Alfalfa, almost 3%. 15% of the land surface is 4 plant species, all of which are genetically limited to produce large seeds, right? A lot of these, the corn, soybeans, are genetically modified. Now they're coming out with genetically modified alfalfa. Much of this acreage is currently treated with glyphosate. All of it is maintained with chemical fertilizers. Almost all of it is treated with neonicotinoid seed treatments that are unnecessary, but that hurt pollinators. This, and I said this yesterday at the Corn University, agrochemicals are an addiction by their definition. By their definition. The more you use, the more you need to use. The only way that we can maintain a simplified monoculture system is through the inputs of agrochemicals. We've eliminated the biodiversity that used to function within these systems. The only way to make them productive is to replace that biodiversity with a jug. With the jug. Who wins in an addiction scenario? It's not the addict. It's not the addict, it's the guy selling the drugs. Right? Corn. It's a business decision. We plant what we plant because we want to make money, right? This is a business decision. Corn prices are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In 2016, we increased our corn acreage. That's dumb. That is a bad business decision. All right? Who wins in an addiction scenario? It ain't the farmers. It's not the farmers. Step one in this process, in healing this process, is recognizing that pests, if you have a pest problem in your system, that is your system telling you that something is out of whack. If all you do is go out and buy a jug to dump on this pest problem, be it a weed, be it a fungus, be it whatever, if you just buy a jug, then you're not solving the problem. You're solving the symptoms. All right? Let's focus on the problem. That's simplification. What is the solution? This is what's driving us right now. Changing the way that we produce our food. Changing the system. If all we're doing is changing minor components of the system without changing the system itself, trying desperately to make that thing work, then we are not going to get where we need to go. Anything less than this, and the bees are going to continue to die. Why is this important? No bees, no plants, no people. It's just that simple. But what is so inspiring is that the farmers are already doing this. This is not pie in the sky. This is me observing the leading innovators who are absolutely changing everything. Okay? I mean, you got Dave Brandt is on that list, right? You guys have, isn't there a field day or something like that? Oh, it is? Oh, that's a shame. You guys need to get over to Dave's place. Anyways, these guys have all dropped insecticides for decades. They don't use them anymore. Not because they hate Monsanto. It's not because they despise all chemistries. It is because when they return biodiversity to their system, they don't need that junk. It is a business decision. All right? So let's talk about this. How do you diversify? How do you diversify? Well, one way, and this is a good way of improving habitat for pollinators as well, that we've been thinking about is growing something else. If corn, soybean, wheat prices are in the tank, cow prices are in the tank, grow something else. We were interested in what types of new crop species we could produce, especially oilseed crops, that might also be conducive to pollinators and other beneficial insects. Thinking that if we had a rotation of these things on our farms where floral resources are always available to beneficial species, then we might be able to not only make money, but also improve our natural resource base. Specifically, what are these things? Some of them you recognize, things like canola and sunflowers and flax, things like that. Then there's also some weird stuff like camelina and borage and echium. What is the benefit? I'd rather make money by selling seed by the pound than by the bushel. Right? Borage is selling for $6 a pound. And you can make about 300 pounds an acre. If you can figure out the harvesting. I tried last year. Not only that, but these are all good bee plants. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to go out and we sampled the insects on each of these different flower species, and then we tried to figure out how we can rank their conservation value. What are these things being grown for? So these are all oil seeds. Some of them are for the cosmetics industry, some of them are for biofuels, some of them are for jet fuel, things like this. So we grouped all the collected organisms into predators and then other species. We also looked at pollinators from this, and then we used the matrix, or looked within this matrix for which plant species were the best by looking at the duration of the flowering period, but also the attractiveness of these different flower species. In all, we had about almost 11,000 different insects that we collected, about 70 different species. A lot of these were little flies that entomologists dread because they're such a pain in the neck to try to identify. That's a lot of diversity. I had seen, as a result of this, things that we had never seen before out in our fields, okay? I mean, I've been studying bees and stuff for a while now. I've been studying insects for even longer. There were bee species that came to these field plots that I didn't know lived in eastern South Dakota. I mean, we hadn't seen them before. It was really remarkable. If you build it, they will come. Predators. We had about 35 different species of predators. What are these things? Little parasitoid wasps. They use their stingers for stinging other insects, laying their eggs in other insects, not people. Okay. Every species of insect we entomologists speculate that there's at least one specialist parasitoid wasp that stings only it. So a lot of the diversity of animals on planet Earth is little itty bitty wasps. Okay? Millions of species. Yeah, we caught lots of those, lots of little spiders. We had also a bunch of, hoverflies, ants. If you have ants in your system, be very, very thankful. Ants are an extremely important seed predator for weeds, as well as predator for insect prey. We had damsel bugs, we had these baritids, we had hoverflies, other things like this, lady beetles. So you remember that little nice graph here? This is what the flowering periods were supposed to be, so that they were all staggered, right? We did get staggering, but they flowered at much different times than what our little predicted matrix had. But what we ended up seeing is that, and then we compared everything to corn, figuring that these plant species might be an alternative to planting corn within a rotation. So you see the flowering times. Some of these things flowered for a really long period of time. Flowers varied substantially in the number of natural enemies that they attracted, right? Out of all of these, this is that conservation index, we found that calendula, kufia, borage, and echium were some of the best. Out of the spring flowering ones, the spring canola was really strong, okay? And then corn was the lowest. As the number of predators increase within the system, we see that as the number of insects increase, we see the number of predators increase as well. They're responding to those prey resources. So by providing flowers to a system, you're not just providing nectar and pollen, you're also providing a lot of different insect prey. Biodiversity feeds on itself, okay? So these were the highest in terms of population conservation. And we ended up advancing this project for pollinators as well. And what we found is that the borage, the spring canola, and then the kufia were the species that we advanced for looking more at just the pollinators. So multiple ecosystem services can come from these flowering oilseed crops. And all of them were probably a better alternative than our current system. All right, beneficial insects. What other services do they provide? Do you guys, are there any livestock producers here? Anybody grow livestock? All right. I'm sure everybody was wondering, and I've been hearing in the audience whispers, when's somebody going to show a picture of cow crap? Well, wait no longer. Wait no longer. We got a big steamer right there. Why is this important? Because if dung is not degraded, it fouls pastures at the rate of about 1/10 of a hectare per animal per year. It starts to accumulate. That adds up, right, when you've got high stocking densities. It also, most of the pests of cows have a dung living stage. Flies, the maggots, if you're wondering where your fly problems come from, look to the poo. All right? Helminth parasites in the animals all live within the turds of the cows. Okay? So how do these dung pats get degraded? It's an insect process. If you do not have strong dung arthropod communities and insects living in your cow poop, then you've got a problem on your hands. We value dung beetles alone at $380 million every year. I did not shoot this cow poop with a shotgun. Those holes are from all the dung insects that are living in there. Services of these dung beetles that we can put value on are nutrient cycling, increasing the plant community within a pasture, and then reducing or eliminating all of your pesticide use in your animals. Right. But those numbers are about 40 years old. People have not been looking at this very, very strongly for decades, right? And so we wanted to try to solve this problem. We wanted to try to get some new numbers on what dung insects are living in poo. So we did this with an exclusion cage. So this was one of the more filthy projects that I think I've ever run. We collected extremely fresh cow crap, and then we brought it back into the lab, and we weighed out little aliquots of 1 kilogram of poo, and then we put them out into a pasture, and some of them we put a cage on, and some of them we allowed all of the insects to kind of do their thing on, okay? And then we collected these pats regularly over 42 days. This was all work done by my master's student, Jacob Pachenka. So every time we would collect a pat to observe what was happening over the age of that pat, we would take a Berlese sample. So we would take a core using a golf cup cutter, and we would drill through the turd and into the soil, and then we would bring it back in, and then we would warm it. We would warm it up. Yeah, you guys get the idea, all right? We'd warm it up good and hot and dry that sucker out, and then all of the insects try to escape from the light, and we can collect them in there. This typically is not how people study poop insects. Normally they put a little trap out there. There's no poop involved, right? But we really wanted to dig deep, right? What did we find? Jacob has identified, as part of this project now, almost 200,000 insects from poop. We have collected 109 different species from cow turds in eastern South Dakota. Of these, only 13 of these species are dung beetles. So dung beetles get this reputation of being like king of the pat, right? Everybody loves dung beetles. They all want to study dung beetles because they've got a really cool biology. If you haven't looked into it, it's really amazing what they do. We found that that's really the minority of species that are out there, though. This is the age of the pat down here. So we got them all the way up to 42 days old. And this is how many we were finding. This is, per pat, right? We found an average of 500 and almost 20 insects per pat. over the life of this thing, right? 500 insects in there. That's incredible. What also was interesting is that this is early in the season and this is later in the season. But in both cases, you see this climbing population of insects, and then right about 14 days, everything drops. Climbing population drops by 14 days. And then you see this even population of dung beetles and things like that, and dung insects in general. The other thing that you would point out is that our exclusion cages worked to some degree. You can never eliminate all of the bugs from a habitat, but we did a pretty good job at reducing that. What was so interesting is that most, let's see if it's, okay, I'll talk about it here in a second. The 7-day-old age is really important. What we think is going on there is that that's when the pats are moist. And the dung insects, a lot of them are filter feeders, so they're eating like out of this like juicy poo. But once it dries out, they kind of take off. All right. So this is what we found, the organic matter, basically the weight of the pats. We find that in both of these cases, so this is when the insects were allowed in, and this is when they weren't allowed in. And we see that what happens is that early in the season, you've got this almost immediate drop-off in how much poop is still sitting on the soil surface. And the insects are the cause of that major drop. The rate of degradation of the poo then remains fairly constant as the season progresses. So anything that disrupts colonization within the first 2 days of that poop throws off your degradation for the rest of the period, okay? And by 30 days is what we find. That insects increase the degradation by 30 days, a whole month. So insect abundance, insect richness, the number of species that are out there dictates whether or not you're going to have dung accumulation, whether or not you're going to have maggot problems on your pats. So where do dung beetles fit into this? How important are they when they're only about less than 3% of the community? We find that dung beetle colonization drives everything else that's going on in that pat. Even though they are the absolute minority of insects that are living in cow poop, what happens is that they're the first ones to the party. And they punch holes through the skin of the poop and open up highways that make it available for everything else. So without dung beetles, we do not have colonization of that pat anymore. That really hadn't been well documented with empirical data. So that was pretty exciting. So we find as dung beetle diversity goes up, you see arthropod abundance within that pat going up. Want to know a good way of killing off dung beetles? Use ivermectin. We found significantly more maggots in pats that had been treated with ivermectin on ranches that were using ivermec. That's a big deal. Okay, that flies in the face of what we understand, right? You're supposed to use this stuff because if you don't use it, then you're going to lose everything, right? But what we find is that the more you use, the more you need to use. That's the definition of an addiction. Colonization must happen early, and although a minority of these dung beetles are really, really important in those community dynamics. All right, how does diversity work? How does diversity work? How can we use it through our practices on our farms to apply these things while still producing food? We were interested, this is going back into the Wayback Machine. All right, we were interested in how to transition to organic production. Why? Because we just sampled a bunch of corn farms. The organic corn farmers were netting about $1,000 an acre. All right? That's a good business decision. That's a good business decision. Organic strategies, but you have a period when you transition to organics. For those of you who haven't tried to do this before, there's a period where you don't get the organic premium for producing organic produce, but you also don't get to use all of the chemicals and things like that that you would maintain a normal system with, a conventional system with. And so that transition period's kind of a dicey period, right? You need to be able to make money, but you can't use a lot of the chemistries. So we wanted to test different organic transition strategies that had been used in central Illinois by farmers to try to weather this period of time. And we wanted to see how these ecosystems functioned within these different systems, these different approaches. So the entire project design, this was a very multidisciplinary project. I was just looking at some of the bugs. This was so we started all of these systems in a rye cover mix, and then we went into a low intensity system. This was a perennial lay mixture, which means alfalfa, peas, grasses, you know, a diverse planting out there. A lot of times we think, oh, forage, that's alfalfa. You want, alfalfa is a great plant. We need to diversify these forage mixes, unless you want perennial problems with your alfalfa. So we studied this: very low input costs, but also low return. You don't make a lot of money off of this, but you also don't spend a lot to grow it. The high intensity system was vegetables, a lot of maintenance in that system, right? Tillage, things like this in order to keep pests at bay and make that system productive, but you also get a very high rate of return. And then our cash grain system was an intermediate system. Then I went out and we looked at all of the bugs that lived on the soil surface. We sucked them up with a little aspirator. We also wanted to study predation, both granivory on weed seeds, because weed seeds get eaten a lot by insects, especially in no-till systems. They are an important component that decides when and where you have weed pests in your system. And we also wanted to look at predation. And to do this, we got these little caterpillars, and then we stuck a pin through their butts, and then we put them out into the field. And then we looked at them to see who came and ate the little caterpillars during the day and at night. So here's a little predator. This is a soldier beetle larva that's gobbling up this maggot, or this caterpillar pest. Incidentally, the caterpillars can survive their entire lives. They have a pin stuck through their butts. They can even pupate and become adult moths with a pin stuck through their butts. They spend their entire lives. Actually, it reminds me of some supervisors that I've had over the years. This is what we found. This is diversity. And this is in the low intensity system, that lay system we found, and then this is the high intensity system. So in predator diversity was really favored by a perennial system with a lot of diversity in there. This is the number of predators that we are finding per meter squared, up to 80 to 90 predators in the low intensity system per meter squared. When we do actual density samples in healthy soils, we can find up to 1 billion predators per acre out there. Not only is that an important source of predation, hell, it's an important source of carbon in the soil, right? Weekly seed removal rates. We were finding that in the low diversity, in the low intensity, high diverse system, we were losing 63% of our seeds per week that were getting eaten. That takes its toll. That takes its toll on weeds. This was 28% higher than the cash grain system and 78% higher than the most disturbed system. Predator abundance and the number of prey consumed. As predators became more diverse and more abundant, they ate more. They ate more of your pests. We've replicated this experiment now in corn. We've replicated this experiment on maggots in dung pats. We've replicated this experiment now on weed seeds in soybean fields. Diversity is the answer. The diversity. I talked about that a little bit yesterday too. So, not only was it a more productive system, but this lay system had a 42% yield bump when you started planting organic soybeans. What are they going for about right now? About $25 an acre or something like that? Or $25 a bushel? $25 a bushel? 42% higher is quite a bit of money. The solution. We can talk all day long about all of the problems, right? All of the problems. And I've got this issue, and I used this jug, and it solved that issue, and something else popped up. And so I used another jug, and now I've got another problem in my system. And we can try to nurse these things along as much as we want to. What it's going to take is changing the way that we think. It's all up here. That's where it starts. It's not at the jug salesman. It's not even out in your fields. The changes start here. You got to think bigger. You got to think longer term. You got to think about diversity. You got to think why you're farming to begin with. I've talked with a lot of very innovative farmers. There are central principles they are not organic necessarily. They are not doing this because of some ideology. They are doing this because it's a good business decision. The principles are consistent with these folks. There are certain principles that are consistent. Number one, they eliminate tillage from their system. Tillage kills biology. Biology is the basis of your food production system. Okay? So first off, they go no-till. If you're in a system where like vegetable production or something like that, you recognize that tillage has an adverse effect on biology, and you take other steps to try to replace that biology. All right? They always leave a living root in the soil. What does that mean? There is no fallow period here. Fallow is a myth. That this somehow increases the productivity of your system, even in arid environments. That is a myth. Change the way you think. The roots, the covers. You've got 30-inch rows, that's 30 inches of bare soil in your system. Fill it up. Fill it up. Let's get these interseeds going. Right? Some plant diversity is better than no plant diversity. More plant diversity is better than less. Diversity is the key. The diversity of your system entirely relies on the plant community. We could talk about microbes, we could talk about bugs, but the energy enters your system through the plants. You got to start there. How do you diversify? Cover mixes. Interseeds, diverse crop rotations. Dwayne Beck likes to say that the rotation that we like in South Dakota is corn, snow, corn. That's not diverse enough. We need to expand that out, right? Expand that out. Field margins are all tools. And then the last principle is we've got to be integrating livestock and cropping systems. That is a key element. Not only does it help the whole system move forward and regenerate soil, regenerate carbon in your system, it also adds a revenue stream so that you are not subject to every grain price fluctuation as they go up and down. 36% of the terrestrial land surface of our planet is food production. It's devoted to food production. It gives us a lot of the problems that we're facing right now are directly tied to the simplification of this, right? Climate change, pollution, human health issues. Let's connect the dots here, folks. Let's connect the dots. The question is not how are we going to, diversify or use our food production systems to conserve biodiversity and in ecosystem functions. The question is, what's going to happen to us if we don't? And that's an important one, right? But I think because this is such an important component of our landscape, it is the largest biome on planet Earth, we can use this as a tool to combat planetary scale problems. I would not be here if it was not through the generosity and the goodness of so many people from around the world who made this possible, okay? As well as an absolutely wonderful team of enthusiastic young scientists that just make getting up out of bed in the morning just a hell of a lot of fun. So with that, Ecdysis Foundation, you can go to our websites if you'd like to know more, and Blue Dasher Farm. Ecdysis means shedding the old skin. It's a geeky entomology term for shedding, metamorphosis. If you would like to hear more or get on our mailing list as new research comes out, there's a sign-up sheet over there for your email addresses. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. Please consider following us.